Hello and welcome to Talking WoW, the podcast where, believe it or not, we talk about World of Warcraft. My name is Tom, and today we are going to be talking about Rediscovering WoW, a journey back to Azeroth. And to do that, I have two very, very special people with me today. One of those special people is our guest, and our guest is RikPixel, who is a content creator and a streamer, and probably does a lot more other really, really cool things as well.
No, that's it. That's just my.
That's it. Okay, that's good. I'm glad my notes were right for that. Welcome, Rick. It is so great to have you on Talking WoW. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited to talk about lots of WoW things. I haven't had a chance to talk about WoW stuff for a while, so this is actually kind of quite exciting for me.
And of course, it's that other person that's here sometimes. It is my co-host, Marty. Hey, Marty.
I'm still here.
Still here, Marty.
You make it sound like that's an achievement. Like, I'm still going. I'm still here.
I'm still allowed to be on this this podcast.
Yeah, I've had a few, dicey moments. But we're keeping him around. You know, like that old chair you have in your living room. You're like, I just can't get rid of it. Yeah. I can't. I've got to keep it around.
It doesn't fit in the car. You just can't get it to the dump.
So yes, today we are talking about rediscovering World of Warcraft, because many people, many players, even myself at some point, have stopped playing World of Warcraft, especially in the last few years. We've had the widespread harassment and discrimination from Blizzard in 2020, and also when it comes to things in the game, the most recent expansion that we had before Dragonflight, Shadowlands, also received a lot of criticism and saw probably, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say an exodus of players leaving the game to find pastures new. So in this episode, we're going to just be talking a little bit more about that. And Rick, we'll start with you. You have been playing, I know because I watch you Twitch stream from time to time. I know you're a big fan of the MMOs. You are... Mm-hmm. You've got your fingers in many MMO pies, much like myself. I like a good MMO, and I know that you have some history playing World of Warcraft, but in recent times, have you found yourself away from World of Warcraft and in other places?
I have indeed, yeah. I think kind of what you mentioned already are the two things that were my biggest reasons for stepping away from WoW. There were some other reasons, like the people who I was playing with had moved on to other things as well. So like the group that I had, I was never really in a guild necessarily. I've never found myself in like a concrete guild when I've been playing WoW, but I've always had like a core group of friends. And some of them kind of drifted and moved off to different games and stuff. So that element wasn't there. But the two main things for me was I started playing in Wrath of the Lich King, end of Wrath of the Lich King, I should say. Like the last maybe patch of Wrath of the Lich King is when I started playing. And that was mainly because I was finally at uni and I had my own money and I didn't have my parents telling me that I wasn't allowed to play World of Warcraft. Because that's
freedom.
Literally, that's why I didn't start playing it when it came out, essentially. So yeah, that's when I started, and I played solidly through all the patches, through everything. Really, really enjoyed it. I think I had a kind of a better glance of like modern. I say modern, it's ancient WoW now technically, but modern day at the time, because I came at the end of Wrath of the Lich King, started like Cataclysm was my first expansion. That was my first idea of expansion. So all the things
Sorry
changed.
About that.
I know. Well, this is the thing. This is the thing. Everything that everyone, all the things that people were like, "Oh my god, this is terrible." I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing," because it was my first kind of exposure to what an expansion was in MMO. But yeah, I played through all of that heavily. Battle for Azeroth was probably a little bit shaky. There was some stuff in there that I was a bit like, I don't know if this is going the right direction. Mainly because I'm a massive Sylvanas stan, and I really don't like what they did with her character. So there was that. And then when when Shadowlands came out, I played for the story, but the end game loop was just not it for me. It didn't hold me. The more I would rather crap in my hands and clap than ever have to kind of do anything in the more, if I'm being completely honest.
I mean, I can see that.
Yeah.
I can understand that 100%.
Yeah.
I was not
We
sure
don't
where
want no
I was
more.
not. Yeah, exactly. I was not sure where it was going, but when the landing was perfect.
Yeah.
I agree. I would probably do the same.
Literally, I just went as well because like that was what they presented to you, right, as the end game for Shadowlands. They were like, "This is the end game. This is what you're going to be doing. If you want to do stuff, you have to progress in this area." Now, I remember vividly just going, "No, like, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's just not going to happen." Which is a shame because Torghast was potentially like had a lot of potential, but it wasn't enough to keep me interested. So that's when I kind of stepped away properly. That's the first time I've been like, you know what, this is it. I cancelled my sub. I was like, I'm not gonna play this anymore. Very soon after that, all of the allegations about the sexual assault and everything that was happening under Blizzard's umbrella came out, and that kind of helped me just be like, you know what, yeah, I made the right choice. This isn't what I want to do at the moment. Not until I've seen kind of some significant improvement am I going to bother coming back. So yeah, that's kind of why I stepped away. And then Dragonflight came along. And in that time, I had seen improvement. I say that it's very easy to say on the outside that, you know, buy into a PR message that some things have improved.
Exactly.
But I actually do have a bunch of friends that work at Blizzard, and I reached out to them kind of on the side and just asked. I was like, internally, are things changing? Do you feel personally that there is the workspace is better, that they're doing better? And I'm not going to name names, obviously, but from all the people that I spoke to, which was a nice handful of people, they all came back and said that yes, that there had been improvements. They felt that, you know, Blizzard was doing better, and they had nothing to lie to me about. Some of these people I've been friends with for years. I know they wouldn't, you know, send me down the river for nothing. So I kind of felt comfortable being like, you know what, okay, you know, I'm interested in Dragonflight. I feel like there's been improvement both publicly and both behind the doors. So yeah, you know what, I'm gonna give it a chance. And so yeah, I kind of came back with Dragonflight.
Yeah, and I'm in a similar position with returning for Dragonflight as well. And before me and Marty did this podcast many years ago, we had an all Blizzard podcast, so we were covering like everything to do with Blizzard, and it got to a point there where there was a lot of bad stuff happening internally at Blizzard, and you know, with lots of layoffs, and then moving on to that, and eventually with these harassment and discrimination as well. And it got to the point for me where I had to step away from the content creation, and then because of that, stepping away from the game as well. And obviously the feelings I was having was like nothing compared to like what people were actually going through at the company. But I felt like I had to distance myself from that, because World of Warcraft is something that I've been really close to since it came out, and it's something I've been feeling very passionate about. And when all this happened, I just thought, I don't recognize this game anymore. I don't recognize, you know, the messaging or just what's going on there. And this isn't stuff that was new. Like, it had been happening for for all the years that I've been playing Warcraft, and you were horrified by it. Like, you were genuinely like, this is awful. Like, this is a game like I poured my heart into and I love, and behind the scenes, this is what's happening. Like, it's absolutely sickening. I think a lot of people out there, content creators, gamers, they just had enough, and they're just like, look, I gotta walk away from this. Like, I can't give my heart to this game anymore, even though there's so many moving parts to a company that are making video games. There's good people working at Blizzard, people that are passionate about what they're doing there, and it's easy to blanket that under one thing, that is one entity, or that is one person doing all the wrong things. It's not. And there is a situation there where you're not justifying your actions or anything like that, because like, we know how companies work, and there's not like one person you can blame for things. Just going off a little tangent, it's, for me, I have the discussion with people about Blizzard and Harry Potter, and for me, I can look at the whole Harry Potter thing and I'm like, well, that comes back to one person, whereas the Blizzard stuff, there's a lot of stuff happening there, and that maybe that is a poor comparison, but for me, I think like there isn't a Mr. Blizzard out there or a Mrs. Blizzard out there where it's like, well, this person created all these problems. No, there's just, it's deep rooted in it, and it needs to be cleaned up. And it is quite reassuring that some people at Blizzard, and they are actually following through on their word, because they could just do the PR thing where they're saying, yeah, we're working on it, but that culture is still rife there, and that would definitely make me feel uncomfortable. Like, I am out there, I'm seeing the messaging that they are coming through with, and we're seeing changes from the outside, but we obviously don't know what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
And you are trusting somewhat there, and maybe that's not a good thing to do with a big company like that and capitalism and all that shite. But when it is something that you felt passionate about as well, there's still some good in there that you can rediscover. And there's communities out there, there's people that play the game. Like I'm saying, it's just so many different things, isn't it, that make up everything to do with Blizzard and their games.
No, I absolutely agree. I think one of the big points that I like to make is that I think in a capitalistic society, we sometimes can only vote with our wallets, right? That's the only thing we can do, because it's the one way that people listen, and it's the one way that people actually start taking note. And I do believe that, like, I don't want to, we're skirting on the edges of cancel culture, which I don't necessarily want to get into, because I think that's a whole crock of shite. But in general, like, if you do not believe in what someone is doing or a company is doing, then you should rescind your support. If that's monetary, if that's vocal, or if that's social, whatever it is, you should rescind your support and make it known of the reason you're doing, which is, I think, as you say, is what a lot of people did, which is good. However, I do think on the flip side of that, it's similarly as important to re-establish your support when those people try and make the right moves and they're trying to do the right thing. And I've had this conversation with some people, and some people agree, some people think I'm just a Blizzard simp, and that's fine if people want to think that. But the reason I say that is because people need to see, and I mean this in a wider kind of societal context, people need to understand that when you do the right thing, people will start supporting you again. Because if people just leave and never come back, and that's it, it's the end, and they've decided just to cut you off, they are fully intended, that's fully their right to do that. But if the message that sends is, even if they start doing the right thing, there's nothing to gain from it. So why are they going to do the right thing? In my head, anyway, that's how I look at it. So I like to think that, as I said, I spoke to these people, I saw the changes that we're making. And honestly, in Dragonflight, the expansion itself, there is so much representation, there is so much inclusivity and diversity that I have never seen in World of Warcraft ever over my entire lifetime of playing it, let alone in one expansion. And honestly, also not really seen in other MMOs either, that I was highly impressed, to be perfectly honest. And I was like, you know what, I think this is worth me supporting again. So yeah, I think that it's a relatively important part of the conversation, is kind of like, you know what, yeah, sure, take away your support, show how you're feeling, vote with your wallet, do all those things, but also don't forget that, we need to also show support again when things are going in the right direction.
I think, the video game industry as a whole, there is so much there that needs changed, and we are seeing change starting to happen. We are by no means there when it comes to like where we want to be in the video game industry.
Absolutely.
But we are starting to see, like, the whole thing with Blizzard sent a seismic event through the industry that, look, this is happening, and it's not just happening at Blizzard, like, it's happening everywhere, and so much needs to change. And it's, there's the harassment, and there's the discrimination, and there's the how employees are being treated, and we're seeing especially in America now with the unionization of a lot of companies as well, that like this change, it's not going to happen overnight, and it is going to be a long-term thing. But we obviously all want to advocate for a better video game industry, a more inclusive industry where people are able to go through that, and they're able to get into positions where they're able to start influencing the games that we are playing as well, because that makes better stories, that makes new experiences that we need, and that makes better games, like you mentioned with Dragonflight. And it is something that I noticed coming back into the game. It's something I'll probably get into deeper on another episode as well, is that inclusion and diversity, for me, it felt natural in Dragonflight, that I and it's easy for me to say as a white guy sitting here, like, oh yeah, it felt really natural to me. Like, it doesn't feel like it's being forced or anything like that. And I was just playing Warcraft, and I'm seeing the character that's deaf and has an interpreter, and I'm like, that's such an interesting aspect to a character.
Yep.
I was like, wow, like, I've never seen like a deaf character in a video game and they have an interpreter, and having that representation and having characters like this, it makes the world more believable, because guess what? That is the world that we live in. We are all different, and we do all have different outlooks, and we are all different people. And hey, Azeroth is a world as well, so of course we're not all going to be the same.
I couldn't agree more. I'd forgotten about that character. Actually, I was thinking of different examples until you mentioned it, because it was so, the way they'd integrated it into the game was so amazing, and I kind of didn't realize what was happening at first. There was a moment of, wait a second, the quest window wasn't quite, or the quest text wasn't quite the same as what I'm used to, because I'm hit with those quest windows literally every second in World of Warcraft. So I was like, wait, there's something different about this. And then when I realized it, I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then it didn't change the way that didn't change my questing progress in Dragonflight at all throughout that entire zone. It didn't have an effect on it. It was just super smooth, and I walked away from it, kind of going, that was so subtle and natural. And that's what I was seeing in other places. There are queer relationships all over the place in Dragonflight that are just not really, there's not a spotlight on them or anything. It's just two people kind of just living their life. And if you happen to do that quest, because some of them are side quests, you will, if you read sometimes between the lines, you'll notice, and sometimes you could probably, if you're not necessarily looking for that kind of thing, you may not even realize. But it's just the bits that they've just dropped in here and there are just so kind of, as you say, natural, and it flows so nicely that it's good. Especially, I was ranting about this on a stream actually the other day about how I'm really annoyed that in fantasy in general, that you create this brand new world that is free of everything in the real world, and then you still decide to have racism and misogyny and homophobia in them, but there's no reason to have them in your fantasy world, because the reasons that they exist in our world literally aren't there in the world that you've created. They don't exist, but you've decided to put them anyway. So when we see that there are these fantasy worlds and these fantasy games, novels, narratives, whatever out there that are kind of just going, you know what, this is not a thing in our world, and we're able to just kind of remove all of those elements, it's really nice to see.
Just thinking off the top of my head as well, that there's also a few nods to mental health and things like that as well with certain side quests. So, and I feel like from my perspective in Dragonflight, and it's just something I know there's been characters in the past as well, but it feels like Dragonflight has taken a lot more care with that, and I hope going forward we do see more of this, because I think it is important that everyone has somebody that they can relate to.
Absolutely.
So let's talk to Marty for a second, because me and Rick are talking about, we walked away from World of Warcraft, and Marty didn't, as far as I'm aware. Marty kept on being the lone subscriber of World of Warcraft.
It was so nice
during
having
Shadowlands.
It was nice having the whole place for myself. My parents are out. It's just me home alone. It was amazing. And no, actually, I think I might actually shock you a little bit that I actually did walk away from World of Warcraft for a little bit, where I delved into other games. But I did end up going back to World of Warcraft because I have still a lot of friends playing. It's just that game, that world that keeps sucking me back in every time.
Yeah.
And how did you find it? Because I know, and we've talked about it before, about what Shadowlands was like, because I'm living Shadowlands through the voices of other people. I'm like, was it really that bad? How did you find it during Shadowlands? Because like you say, you're part of a guild, and you've got, I know, close friends as well. Did you find that there was a bit of a drop off, and did you find yourself at times being like, wait, where is everyone?
I mean, I think all the new systems that are in place, like phasing and sharding and stuff like that, I don't really feel like you ever feel like you're alone in the world. I feel like you're always seeing someone there. They might just not be from your server. So no, I actually don't think you could see it in that way. But I mean, obviously you could see it on your guild, that more and more people started dropping off the surface of Azeroth and things like that, and a lot of the recruitments needed to be brought in if you wanted to keep doing things. So I think it's more like that people that you were used to being online weren't online anymore.
And with the introduction of Dragonflight, so this is where I've come back into the game, and it was only actually on the day Dragonflight released that suddenly I had this feeling in me, and I haven't felt it for years. I'd quit Warcraft. I was done with it. I had no intention of coming back. There was just no burning desire to play the game again. I thought, that's it, 2.5 years. I don't have that urge to come back, and I've took breaks in the past. And then Dragonflight, that expansion hype. Suddenly, I'm sitting watching a Taliesin and Evertel video just before the expansion launch. The video's only like 15, 20 minutes long, and afterwards, something's burning inside of me. And maybe that's credit to Taliesin and Evertel. And suddenly, I'm like, oh, geez. Like, I want to come back. Like, I want to come back. It feels like these new systems in the game, and the systems that aren't there anymore, that it feels like a fresh page. Did you feel like that, Rick?
I did feel like that. I think so. I am a self-admitted wiki whore. I am someone who will go to a wiki of a certain I don't know, fan base, whatever, and spend hours. And there'll be like 3 hours later, my tab system on my browser is like unfathomable. You can't see what the tabs are because there's so many of them. Because I'm just like jumping into as many rabbit holes as I can. That's kind of the part of World of Warcraft that I like. I like learning about the characters, about the places, about the people, the story. And whilst there was that in Shadowlands, they took us to a place that we'd never heard of before. They introduced us to characters that had no meaning to us, and hadn't been built on or anything like that. So I think a lot of me stepping away from it wasn't just like, as I said, like the war was horrific, which it was, but there was also there was nothing emotionally keeping me there. I was like, I don't know where I am. I don't know these people. I don't know these places. I don't care about the Arbiter. I don't care about all these things, that literally you've never spoken to me about before. And that's part of that is, a personal thing, and I'm completely aware of that. But that's what draws me, like having that expansion about something that has been like, just there in the background for ages, and just like, being considered. Like Legion, for example, was incredible because it was like Burning Crusade was something that has been there. Obviously there was the Burning Crusade expansion, but it had been there ever since then, just chipping away in the background. And then when the Legion came along, it was like everything came together, and it was this big story about things that you'd known about and you'd been hearing about, and it was great. And Dragonflight felt like that again for me. Like the dragons we know at the end of Cataclysm, they lost their powers, they kind of took a back seat. But they have still always been there. The Dragonflights have always been there doing something, and it always felt like something was building up. When they brought in Rathian, it was like, okay, Rathian is clearly here for a reason, and it's clearly big dragon story. And interestingly enough, I think he has taken actually a little bit of a backseat in this expansion. I don't think he's been as front of the pack as I thought he was going to be. But still,
I think we'll see that soon.
Kind of stuff.
I think we'll see
absolutely, yeah. In 10.1, especially from what I've seen, I think he'll take a bit more of a front seat. Yeah, but like that's what got me back, right? I saw those things. I saw people talking about it. I saw those like the trailers and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, this is the World of Warcraft I remember.
Yes.
This is the stuff that I feel so like attached to. And I was looking at the characters that were being name dropped, and even stuff like about Ysera being like potentially coming back. I was like, oh god, I gotta know exactly what's going on there. Holy crap. It was all that kind of stuff and that's what brought me back, and that was what hooked me. And I was like, you know what, I've got to come back and figure out what's going on here.
And I have to 100% agree with that, because I think when World of Warcraft is at their weakest, it's when they're not doing stuff like with Shadowlands. I feel like I would love to see some evil, some baddies also being built up over multiple expansions, and not just be like, oh, we have a new patch or we have a new baddie. That's why Arthas was such a, the Lich King was such an amazing end boss for an expansion, because we knew Arthas not just from this expansion, we knew him from if you've been into the lore, if you played World of Warcraft 3, stuff like that. So when they're building things up over a long time, that stuff works amazing.
Absolutely.
It is an interesting point actually that you mentioned about Shadowlands, and just how a lot of that was a new idea. And I don't think we're not saying don't try new ideas, because I've only played a very little bit of the leveling in Shadowlands, mainly the opening, and I'm coming from a perspective of not playing it when it's current. And I think there's like really deep meaning in some of the messaging that they're trying to portray with that, but I think it just gets a bit lost very quickly. And I think you mentioned like Legion, for example, and you're now mentioning, Dragonflight with that almost fan service. And it makes it sound like it's, a bit of a throwaway, but we do need a bit of fan service. We do need those characters that we've grown up with and we've seen them evolved, and we do like to find out where their story's going next. And I think they did try to do a bit of fan servicing in Shadowlands, but because probably, like you say, Rick, it's in this whole new environment, and the meaning of that is just literally on its head. And you've got these characters that had died and now they're here, but it's just like, I think that is something that it's quite complicated, and maybe they didn't handle that quite as well as they could have. And that's because it is just such a big thing that you almost don't have that limit on, because you are creating this new thing.
Yeah, I think it's like at the end of Legion, for example, like we've been playing through Legion, we've been on the Burning Shores, places that we'd never been before, but we knew because they were part of genuine Warcraft lore for histories and for decades. So we knew these places. It was great to see them. But at the end of Legion, like, let's be honest, they just blew that shit wide open, right? We were in space. We were on planets we'd never heard of before. we were finding out that gods literally came from the core of the planets, and Azeroth was one of them.
It's like Marvel Phase 5, isn't it, really?
Like, it was batshit, genuinely. But we were okay with it, not okay with it. Like, we were enjoying it because they'd set it up in a familiar space. And we had Dalaran, and we had all these things that we were familiar with, and we were like, okay, cool, you've given us our safety blanket. Now feel free to like blow us away. In Shadowlands, literally after 2 quests, you were in this place you'd never heard of before, and there was no story about it. There was like I can't remember what they're called, those really odd, the race of weird ethereal like ribbony people. I can't remember what they're called.
I think that's what they're called.
Yeah, that's the official name. Yeah. But there was all these things that I was just like, there's nothing for me to hook onto here. There's nothing for me to kind of familiarize myself with in the game, and it literally, like, both metaphorically and literally took me away from everything that I was comfortable about. So
we need that anchor, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think there was one moment of potential like saving for it, in that every area you went to, there was a possibility that you were going to run into a character that you knew because they had died, and you were in basically the place where they should be because they died. And they clearly did that with a couple characters. You did see a few characters, and I can understand why they didn't want to just tell everyone, like, just bring everyone back, kind of Avengers Endgame style, just be like, here's literally everyone that you've ever played with in the history of World of Warcraft. I get why they didn't want to do that, but at the same time I was like, I'm not seeing anyone. Like, it would have been nice to see like some familiar faces.
Yeah, I definitely think that there was a few missed opportunities in that. And as you said, what I wanted to say as well, but you said it way better than I could. But yeah, all the places that we've traveled through in different expansions, at least in the beginning when the expansion opens up, it's places that we heard about in lore, in Warcraft 3, just around. We've heard these mentions where Shadowlands, completely new place. Yeah, it makes really good sense to me that obviously that's the one that's going to be rejected in quotation marks. So.
Yeah, it didn't take much for me to be like, I'm good. I'll walk away from this.
Yeah.
But as I say, Dragonflight got it right. Dragon Isles, we've been wanting that since day one, right? Literally day one of World of Warcraft. We've been wanting the Dragon Isles, and I'm kind of glad they waited, because what they've delivered, as far as I'm concerned, is genuinely, it's incredible. It's like everything is amazing. Everything is like a I don't want to say spectacle necessarily, because that makes it sound negative almost, but it feels good to look at everything they've created, and I don't think they would have been able to do it justice if they had done it earlier on. So I'm glad that it is now, and I think it's, I don't know the numbers, I don't know the sub count, etc. of World of Warcraft, but at the same time I would like to think that it's what was needed in the time, given how everyone was kind of reacting to things.
I mean, obviously, I don't know the numbers either, but I could definitely see that there was a lot in the at least in the beginning of the expansion. There was a lot of people online from my guild that by the way, I'm fairly new in this guild, so there was a lot of people that came back that I didn't even knew were in the guild before me. So I think it definitely did bring a lot of people back, and some of them have stayed because they're enjoying their time.
I just want to go on record being like, I feel like they're doing Tyrande dirty as well. That's all I want to say. That's my other little lore point that's on my brain at the moment. They fucked over Sylvanas, and I feel like they're on the way to doing the same to Surrender, and I don't like it. That's it. That's the only point I have to make.
That's the closing statement there. So, if anything, Rick's going to keep playing World of Warcraft just to oversee that and to see if the prediction comes true. But yeah, that was just a little taster, really, of why we've come back to World of Warcraft, and I think we could talk for many hours about why and why not we would play this game. But what about you out there? Have you returned to World of Warcraft from a break, or are you still on a break but somehow you're watching a podcast about World of Warcraft? Why not let us know in the places that you do that? And we just want to thank Rick for joining us on this episode today. What an absolute pleasure, as always, it is to have a guest on the show. But Rick, thank you so much for your insight. It was really valuable, and we appreciate your perspective on this.
Oh, thank you for having me, genuinely. As I said, Dragonflight is... I know it's been out for a while, but I've been in and out of it and kind of experiencing it at my own pace. So it's been nice to chat to people about it and get my kind of, as you say, finger back into the WoW pie. Which I still don't feel comfortable with as a metaphor, but I'm going to use it anyway.
We've been talking WoW, and thank you very much for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in, champion. Did you enjoy this episode of Talking WoW? If so, why not drop a review on your podcast catcher of choice, or leave us a comment. You can find Talking WoW on Twitter or YouTube over at Talking WoW. Hope to see you again soon!